Welcome anyone to this new appointment of Mantova Architettura 2021 dedicated to the exhibition design. I'm Marco Borsotti, Professor of Interior and Exhibition Design at the School of Architecture of the Polytechnic of Milan, and I'm very glad to introduce you our guest, Ico Migliore. Ico Migliore, three-time Compasso d'Oro Award-winning architect, is professor at the Design Department of the Polytechnic of Milan, and is also chair professor at the Dongseo University of Busan, South Korea. And Ico Migliore in 1997 founded in the Milano-based studio Migliore plus Servetto Architects with Mara Servetto, which works with important international brands, museums, institutions, and cities. Their work are characterized by a constant research into the relationship between spatial design and identity, also by means of the expressive use of new technologies, with a view to the new form of cultural sustainability. Among the many works that they have done, I would like to mention the Blue Line Park in Busan, South Korea, that had been recently inaugurated. The today lecture of Ico Migliore is particularly intriguing, starting with the title, The Mirror and the Lens, in which Ico Migliore will focalize on the dialogue between narration and visitors, where the exhibition design acts in reason to create interaction and cognitive experience. In this way, visitors react actively, and the contents of the exhibition create resonance and wonder, using the word of a famous essay by Stephen Greenblatt, a condition that Ico Migliore used to call mirroring effect. In their works, Migliore and Servetto are also involved in establishing a tangible quality of the ineffability of time, because, as Ico usually said, the time has become the true dimension of interior and spatial time. So, Ico, thank you to be with us, and I give you the floor. Ico Migliore.
Thank you very much, Marco. It's a pleasure for me being with you here. Of course, it's not the first time that we talk about this, topics and subject, and I'm very happy to be here with all your students and with everybody to share this content. Of course, as you said, exhibition design is an important, very important field for my studio. We developed in the last 20 years many chances in designing, exhibition, temporary and permanent museum, of course, and also we moved also in public spaces. But since I understood that this is, you have had and you will have again many lectures and many meetings and talk about this subject, I wanted to really to be more focalized in this idea that I call mirror and lens, because I think, quite intriguing subject, but to investigate the relationship there is between virtuality and reality in our projects, and this I think will be the main subject of my speech, of my conversation with you all, and we will investigate some, just to give you some hints about how to manage the space with this kind of a concept, and of course it will be a sort of a glance into my work and into this kind of interesting world of exhibition design, especially linked to the idea of virtuality and reality. First of all, I just Marco Borsotti introduced my studio, but just to give you a few information about myself and about my team. We are, this is the door of my office in Milano, is located in Milano, and we have developed in the last 20 years about more than 500 projects with more than 150 clients, and in very many countries. We are based in Milano and also in Seoul, with a small office in Seoul, but we work worldwide. What we do in our office, we have very many expertise together. We sort of an overlap of many different expertise, because, as I will mention later, but also I think you had the chance to understand that from your conversation in the past, that this kind of field is very much mixing and matching many different expertise, especially starting from architecture. Of course, the interior architecture is the main subject, but on top of that, we have many different expertise in our office, from producing contents to branding and graphics, to interaction and technology, from multimedia, of course, lighting is a key factor of course, in exhibition design, in every project, but in exhibition design very well, and of course the display. We try to establish a sort of, we call a project direction, which we have like the whole organization of my office. My office is not very big; it's about 25 people in Milano. Then we have other people working with us, but I think we can include many different, professionality and expertise working together. The approach, of course, is more or less like this one, moving from like poetry to engineering, because you have to connect those two worlds, being like from concept design, the idea of the visionarity, the thing that you can imagine things of also in relation to the concept, but also we are also doers. I mean, we have to develop things in real. So we have to mix those two things that are, from concepts to concept to contents to details. This is something that we develop inside our office. And I just have here a very quick teaser about our works. And just to sort of small video clip about 1 minute, just to let you know what we do and how we do it. I hope now you can listen to the sound.
Yes.
Okay, this is just to visualize in a very short clip what we do and how we approach to the projects. But there is a sort of a fil rouge among all the projects, and that is our vision. And we summarize our vision in 3 main aspects. The perfect time, which as Professor Bossotti said, I strongly believe, I just published a book about that. The time is a key factor to understand the correct rhythm in interior design, especially in exhibition design. And then moving from time to behaviors, I think that behaviors, what people do, how people act inside our spaces, how the people are involved, how the people, they can become actors inside of our spaces. This is also a sort of a project that involves us in designing a new aesthetic of behaviors, trying to think how they perform, what they do inside spaces, in a sort of a participative way. The third, of course, very important aspect nowadays, especially sustainability, sustainable project, but it's not only in relation to materials, of course, it's in relation very much to the contents. I think that the cultural sustainability is the key factor. To be cultural sustainability, the cultural sustainability means something that can be shared, that has a reason why to be shared. There is a reason why to spend money, to involve people in the sort of a message. And I think those 3 aspects, they really are linked together. And of course, our vision is not just to design objects and spaces, but relationship among people and contents, and in the way the people, they can learn, they can establish, I would say, an empathic situation between the object and the messages, of course. But starting from the beginning, since I was a student, I was worried about how I want to be as architect, right? And I understood later that the main aspect is to be. It's always a matter of identity, of course, and time. Anytime we design something, anytime to approach to a design process, we have to think about the identity, and we need to have the capability of reading and transforming everything in real, but having in our mind, the back of our head, of our mind, the idea that how to present, how to transform a genius logic, the spirit of a place, the spirit of the contents, some specific issues, some brief into identity is the main job that we have to transform in real. Otherwise, we're going to waste, the real spirit of our effort. And we do this in many ways, and we do, of course, as I mentioned before, like I published this book is called Time to Exhibit. There is I call it Directing Spatial Design and New Narrative Pathways, because it involves the idea of how to manage the new way of communicating and the new narrative pathways in projects of exhibition design, especially. And I think research and theory, they have to work together at the same time. We do a lot of research in our office. We do a lot of project, but at the same time developing theories and also researchers. And because I think that nowadays the designer, the interior designer, or the architect needs to, or let's say the exhibition designer needs to understand that the reorganizing a space is sort of a dynamic sequence of what you receive, and to transform that in a new narrative pathway. So I think we need to work as a director, more almost like a movie director, almost like working in a cinema. That's why there is a very big connection that I will let you know after. Those are just a few, a glance in our theory, but after I will explain you more work, showing you the projects. But we need to be in between. We need to be a sort of a director in which we work as architect, of course, as a space designer, spatial design, and also linked to the curatorship. And we do this kind of thing that I call spatial editing, that I think is quite critical. We do not design spaces without any kind of a movement, but activating spaces means we have to activate this kind of a spatial editing, which is how to assemble one scenario and after the other, so in order for the people to understand. And of course, the tool that we manage every day to transform this narrative pathway is to, of course, pathway, frames, and densities, and pathways and frames and density, they're completely changed nowadays. We need to transform those three things, those three, subjects, in something very dynamic, something very connected one to each other. So, if you imagine the idea of frame, is something that we imagine we just go out of the artwork, and we try to move into the dynamic of multimedia, or maybe the frame is my personal laptop or my device, and maybe the frame is the building. So it's something that we need to understand, and we need to manage. It's quite a complicated process. It's also very interesting and fascinating, and also passionate work, but we have to manage those three things and balance between those three main aspects: frame, pathway, and density. Also, to manage the density is a very interesting aspect that could be also for you investigated in the future. Spatial editing is something that transforms the idea of showing something in a sort of a editing sequences, as I said, like in a movie project, almost like when you design a movie, when you conceive a movie. And this is something we need to have in our mind. That's why time, for me, the rhythm is critical, is a key factor. If you can imagine like a director like Christopher Nolan, the way he thinks, or he assembled different movies and different actions and sequences is quite critical, the capability of having that. So I think now in interior design we have to transform that we have to apply our capability, our effort in those fields. And of course the storytelling is also very important. So we move from the storytelling to present only object to a storytelling that presents awareness, a motivation, the reason why we need to establish a storytelling about something. So people, nowadays they need to they have different capabilities, of course, than many years ago. They challenge the activation of your contents. So I think you need to understand that the way the storytelling is conceived is the key factor to establish those kind of relationship between, you know, the contents, of course, that you receive, any kind of subject, and your audience, your visitors. That's why exhibition requires a sort of a multi-layer approach that I also mentioned in the beginning. I mean, I'm not quite sure that I like the word scenography, of course. I know that some of my colleagues, they like the design scenography, because I think scenography is something that you receive from being seated in a theater or being seated in front of very, very nice, you know, the cinema. But there's nothing to do with involving people. I'd like more to conceive this space as an activate, almost like a field on which you can play like a game, and people, they can play there and stay, instead of being merely, you know, a spectator, which I think they shouldn't be like that. So I think that that's why scenography sometimes is a sort of a misunderstanding that could be misunderstood and could be thought as maybe something very scenographic, in the way something that I can see from my eyes, with my eyes, can be, you know, almost like a big allegoric vision. To me, is something that I would like more to transform in a field of action. I think that we design fields on which people play and do things and activate relationships. And I just summarize this just to let you know what we do, in which area we do. We work in these three main subjects, right, topics. First is cultural sharing, that we call everything that is cultural. The second part is brand architecture, which is, you know, involving, you know, brands and also retail store, but also, you know, exhibition for branding. And since 2006 that we were very lucky to win the competition to redesign the Torino Olympic Games. All the city, Torino, the look, we call the look of the city, but was the city of Torino was interacting for the Olympics, the Winter Game in Torino, and we had the chance to install inside the city many different things to establish a very relationship between the storytelling of the city, the Genius Loci of Torino, a very important city, and people visiting that venue for the Olympics, and also for the inhabitants, try to perceive the home city with another perspective, with another point of view. And from there, we developed many interesting chances to transform the urban experiences in something, you know, almost like open air museum, in which you can establish storytelling between spaces and people and inhabitants. I just summarize here in three projects, let's say culture sharing, for instance, but bringing here an example for you just to show you. But all these three fields are very much, they overlap to each other, because they have the same kind of a sensitivity, I would say, about the relationship between time, rhythm, as I said, space editing, and something connected to the way of narrating something different, to involve people and being aware, not only being only in a scenographic way, but to be inside something. And I just brought one example for each of these three things, and then after we go deeply inside the main subject, I'd like to talk to you just briefly, not very, that is the idea of mirroring, and the idea of mirror as an object, as a sort of a virtuality, very interesting object to be treated and to be, you know, used by us, by the exhibition designers, and also it would be very interesting to discuss about that. And this is a project with Madonna della Misericordia. We designed this exhibition inside Palazzo Marino in 2016. This is interesting because it was only one piece. It was probably one of the most important masterpiece of Renaissance that was painted in the 15th century by Piero della Francesca. And since this painted, this wooden, you know, artwork, actually in San Sepolcro is included in a sort of a polyptych, we call, with many other, you know, art pieces together. We wanted to present this to the audience, to the people visiting there, almost like in crescendo experience, meeting that opera. There were many reasons why, because there was a sort of a guided tour for people. Was a sort of a gift from the city to the citizen, and no pay, no ticket, nothing. But people, they need to stay there only for 10 minutes and then move into another. So it was almost like really like being on a theater, a representation of an action of meeting this kind of a great masterpiece. But we wanted to have almost like a climax, people to meet there, not only open a door and you have it there in front. So you have to meet to almost increase your knowledge, raise your capability of perception. And this was exactly like that. We transformed this as a sort of a scenario in which you have, from the beginning, you have sequences by approaching. The people were, there was a remote control in the end of the guide, and the guided tour, they can control this remote control. But after having 10, 15 people together, collect people, they started this remote control, and something happened. Something happened in a sort of a process of scenario, and then you have the chance to meet the opera, and then you leave. You were leaving after that. It was quite effective for the visitors, because the rhythm was very, very fast, but also the interaction and the pathos, the situation. We selected the special kind of a music for this kind of a crescendo, and the people were like an emotion. We thought about an emotional interaction with this great masterpiece. It worked very well, like almost 3,000 people a day for more than 1 month, with a great rhythm. But and the way they met the opera was a sort of, as I said, not just was a sort of a, as I said, climax, meeting the opera at the end and reaching this as the end result. As you can see it here, we started with a very low music, very low light, when people enter to the place, and then there is this music, and then there is this kind of a process with a video mapping on the back, presenting the sequences, how this big masterpiece had been conceived in the past by Piero della Francesca. After, of course, the light goes on, and the people, they can move and they can meet the opera, and they can slowly approach to this kind of almost like a theater within another, within this the city mayor, the city hall. And another example for brand, with the same kind of attitude, working with this kind of extension, digital and physical together, but presenting the idea of architecture with the climax, meeting the contents, is for brand. We designed this bigger. This is another, that is something that I showed you about Piero Francesca, is only one great masterpiece. Then we have another exhibition we did in Seoul about a big brand, was Max Mara, was about the history of fashion, and in the big museum of Seoul. And it was in 2017, 2018. This is the big museum of Don Dagenham Design Plaza Museum, designed by Zaha Hadid. It's a huge museum within the huge hall to receive exhibitions. And the idea was to consider sort of an architecture within an architecture, because we had a very huge hall. It was about almost like 3,500 square meters. And within this big hall, interior hall, like an interior big space, we wanted to present the whole history of Max Mara, but the whole history of 70 years of fashion connected to the brand of Max Mara, including photographers, artists. There's a very interesting pathway that Max Mara established in the last 70 years. But instead of having, like an ordinary exhibition, we wanted to have like we call a time machine architecture, to present this 7, of course, as you can see, almost 7 fingers, under this hemispherical dome, in which we presented this kind of a transformation of storytelling, where people could meet. They had the chance to meet in this place. This is a scale model that we did in my office, and then we do very many scale models, and this is also a scale model in which we project with projectors to understand, of course, and also very interesting to understand, the final shape. This shape was generated by the contents, but still is an architecture shape. So I truly believe that we are architects, we are not scenographers. And I truly believe that anytime also you can have a void space like Albini used to design, you can manage the void and the space between contents. But the idea of not being only scenographic in the way that people only memorize the allegory of something, but also having the idea of being inside of an architectural space. I think this is important. This was the museum, the pavilion open after the opening. It worked very well, because people, they could move, they had the chance to move from one decade to another. They also could stay outside and, having the chance to spend time. And in the center, in the middle, we conceived this hemispherical dome, also like a sort of a small pantheon, conceived in Seoul, and to establish an interesting storytelling between the Italianity, the production of the production of Italy in the world of from Renaissance up to now, but also the idea of the hands doing things, the production of materials in Italy. And to do this, I called, in order to do this in a proper way, it was quite complicated because it was a video mapping on this very big hemispherical dome, like it was about almost like 20 meters. And I called a Korean artist, Yeon Kang. She's a very interesting digital artist. She works in London and in Seoul, and she has a PhD in the Royal College of Art. She's a good friend of mine. She displayed also in the Biennale di Venezia. And together we developed like a storytelling quite intriguing for people, because they had this, as you say, on big couches where they can lie down and see this for almost like, interluding between the visitors, moving from one decade to another. And this was interesting because also the technical part was quite complicated. We had to transform something bidimensional in three-dimensional just by projecting with 5 projectors, very complicated projectors, very huge, big projectors, into an hemispherical dome with the connection, perfect connection on the contents, and was with a special kind of a system, German system, that it was an engineer that transformed this in real. And also we had almost inside that space a natural light coming in from above, and also of course was a projection, but the idea of the contents was very linked to Italianity, almost like a trip in Italy. And it was the connection, was the idea of bringing a square and bringing a square to the contents. Every finger had a different content. It was about the idea of art and codes. There was many art pieces. They have a great collection. Max Mara, they have this they call Collezione Maramotti, Fondazione Maramotti, actually in Reggio Emilia is a great place. I tell you an advice, you have to go there to visit this collection. Is a very nice museum. Actually, it's a factory transformed years ago in a collection. They have a very interesting collection of art. And this was the assembly of this, and was very interesting the way also we developed the storytelling and the content. Every finger was almost like a Wunderkammer of every decade, but inside we have this connection, which is the main, the core, the center, and of course very much engaging and bringing people. They was very well accepted. The Korean, they visited a lot. They came, many people visited this, and also the way they were hosted there was completely different. They were hosted in a very friendly way and spend more time learning more, moving from one content to another, understanding the whole story of that. That's why, and in this project, of course, time, pathways, and the way we transform the narration was very much, it was a one-year project, very complicated, but very interesting. We had more than 1,011 pieces displayed, but great pieces also, from and not about garment and coats, but also in the process of design, materials, sketches, photographers, arts pieces. Is a great collection of the creativity, Italian photographers. There was a big section about photographers. We had, Avedon, Maisel, Newton, the best, Sarah Moon, the greatest photographer they produce in these 70 years for Max Mara. And the third field that I mentioned before, also Professor Borsotti mentioned our intervention in Korea, which is this urban design. I started in Torino for 2006 with the Olympics, and then we had other chances. But this is just open in the end of 2020. Unfortunately, I couldn't go there because of course the reason everybody know. And this was almost like they all know the Eye Line in New York. This is the transformation of the railway, rundown railway that connects almost 5 kilometers of the railway from this is the city of Busan. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but I think I like to do it. You can see this is the city of Busan. City of Busan is a beautiful city, the second city in Korea after Seoul, about 6 million of people, connecting a very beautiful sea and very interesting hills and mountains and skyscrapers also there. And this was the rundown railway that we transform in 5 kilometers of a pathway. Of course, it's probably the longest project we did, of course. And to transform that in a sort of a new time and crescendo pathway. This is the map of the intervention that we did. And meeting what? Meeting nature, meeting meeting the sea, meeting the sky, meeting the birds flying there, because there is an interesting, during the year they're flying by their birds there, and there was also cultivation of seaweed pavilions. So the Genius Loci, we try to transform that in a real storytelling, and people, because in the past they used to go there when the railway was closed. People, they used to go there because there's a very beautiful view, taking pictures, even just climbing up there, because they were not allowed to go there. But just opening that is an open pathway, and transform this pathway in a storytelling, and also in connection between the two paths, the sea and the mountain. Before there was a cut, this railway was the cut. After it became a connection, and also to include the nature, to include the transformation. And of course many other things, but I just want to show you here. We preserve the railway. Partially there is a very slow and small train that still goes, but at the same time we preserve some different pathways for people to move and to travel here and there, to move and to learn to stop, to spend times in many different activities. And that's why it was conceived. We have a theater, we have a place where you can listen the sound of the sea, when you can have like cocoons for people to read and to stay, places in which they can meet. And we design everything. We design from the logo to the brand identity, up to every lighting, materials, flooring, everything. Also, we work with the nature, with the landscape designer together. Also the inclusivity of nature, to try to include everything that happened in the past on the two sides, included in this pathway. So and this will change in the future, because then the nature will activate a relationship between the outside and the inside. Just open, as I said, in the end of the year, in the end of 2020. And we also think about how you can move from one place to another time-wise, when you can stop. For elder people, for young people, for children. We transform this tunnel into a sort of an open-air theater, which we call the Rainbow Tunnel, in which the Rainbow Tunnel you can have like you can have performances with music and people that can organize, or even you can have a place in which you can meet and stay there, just let's say organize, be a sort of an outdoor. We call this kind of a free space. Sometimes we don't know exactly what the free space. The free space is people to be free to use it in a way they, according to the nature, to the spirit of the area. And there was, this was very interesting to develop there. Of course, we transform this tunnel, but with intervention, like this is a curtain arch. And also the lighting and colored mirror that during the night this tunnel becomes a sort of a lamp for this. And also the lighting and the interaction between the structure. We designed those structure that needs a sort of like evocating the speed of the train, but also hosting the possibility for nature to invade, I would say, everything and to transform this new relationship between the presence of the past and also the future. Everything is linked to the Genius Loci. That's why it's a process. Everything is very well connected to what is and what was this place. So those are the area that I mentioned, just to give you, I would say, a glance in our works, just to summarize 3 projects. But I just want to finish not finish. I have still enough time to stay with you, but to talk about what is the main subject that in my speech. I want to talk now about one material and one object, which is a mirror and a lens. Why talking about that? Because I know that maybe you had the chance to meet, as I said, many other architects or designers, and to explain you how to develop your project. And I think the idea of meeting virtuality and reality nowadays is quite critical, because, as I said, I did in my project in the past, I showed you some of my projects. You can manage to transform this kind of interior design in something, virtual, even if it's not through devices, through computer, with the usage of the mirror. I was always fascinated by mirrors and lamps since I was a student, and I was also very much fascinated by that because this is my professor, my mentor, this is the reason why I'm here now talking to you. And he's Achille Castiglioni. I hope you know him. He's one of the great Italian masters in the world of design. And he was my professor. I was my professor in Torino, and then I moved from Torino to Milano because he asked me to work with him, myself and Mara Servetto, who is my partner, of course, together. And this is interesting because this image is something that I always remember. This is a very big mirror that if you still go to the Fondazione Castiglioni, which I advise you to, please go there because it's very interesting for you to meet a unique place. And it's still open. Of course, he died but the foundation is still open. And there is a big mirror, and I remember this mirror. While you enter to the office of Achille, then you have like 45 degrees inclined mirror, and you can see the other part, almost like in a virtual way. It was very much fascinated by this kind of usage of the mirror, and myself too, since I was a student. That's why I want to mention to you the idea, how can we manage spaces with mirror and lens? I think because we can really pick and have some, I give you a few hints about that, so maybe you can investigate in the future and you will manage to transform interior spaces with a sort of a virtuality without maybe using technologies or even adding technologies and digital to this thing. Castiglioni, also designed this very interesting lamp. It's called Gibiliana. This lamp has a rounded mirror on the top, and you can orient direct the light just by moving that kind of a shape. He designed this very interesting exhibition in Milano, at Triennale di Milan in 1970. There was a magazine, very important magazine, Ottagono, and he designed this exhibition only with the usage of mirrors. And just by the angles of the mirror, of course this is an octagon in which objects were included, but just only because of the angles of the mirrors. And I've always been fascinated by that. I think that when we talk about environmental design, meaning designing spaces within another space, negotiating, talking with the background, the idea of using the mirrors is something critical and something also inspiring for me. It was always inspiring. I think I'd like to inspire you in a way that you can transform that. But what is a mirror? What a mirror is? What is? A mirror, first of all, is an object, because it's a physical object made of glass and many other things, aluminum, whatever, something. But first of all, it's an object. In the second part is a concept, because anytime that you mirror something, also you can mirror, we call reflection. We can reflect music. We can reflect myself. We can reflect different things. So it's a concept to mirror something. It's an idea that this is of course Narciso. The idea of mirroring is a concept, and then is a tool. You can use a mirror to activate as a tool, almost like a real tool, very, very technical tool to transform spaces in something different. And I think it is interesting that also the idea of being introspective, being the introspection of mirror. And as I said before the cinema, I truly believe that the mirror is the first cinema with dynamic things in front. There is a very big connection between the idea of a screen, if you stay in front of a window, even when you're window shopping in some city and you see things happening in the mirror, this is really much connection to the idea of transforming the dynamic things in that, right? And of course the presence and existence together. But I just summarized the mirror just for you, just to give you, as I said, just the visions, is in 5 key features of the mirror usage that I'd like to share with you. And of course, the first one is the magic and reveal. You know that when Epifania is also something that happens. This is also named that means mirror, right? And of course, anyone has the mirror of Cinderella or something very, very interesting in which you can the reveal. After the mirror is also a reveal. It's something magic that if you can use it, if you like to use it, or if you understand how to manage this kind of a tool, is very interesting in doing that without being, as I said, too scenographic, but being very narrative. You can use this kind of a material in you have many different kinds of colors, whatever, curved mirrors, whatever, but you can use it in a very many ways to understand and transform this in a to obtain something that will really aware visitors, transform them, include them in something. That's why I mentioned at the end, I will tell you about this kind of a mirroring effect in a life. The other aspect important for mirror is measure. Is very fundamental system to measure people. If you see yourself in something, if you measure yourself, you see your image in something, you understand, you measure your background. You can understand where I'm included, I'm involved there, I can measure that. And also I can transform this kind of a measure into infinite. I can have like, of course you can see two mirrors, one face the other, is a sort of, you can almost reproduce this kind of infinity, right? But you can go from very absent to very present just by using the dimension, the distances, the uses, the visibility, and the idea of measuring things through mirror is very critical, because people to establish a positive relationship between them and the contents, they need to measure themselves. They need to measure spaces, measure contents. That's why I include also the lens. I think mirror is a lens. This is a very interesting. The powers of 10 that I also, if you go on YouTube, you can find this is an interesting film that was produced by Ray and Charles Ames in 77. It's about, I think, about 10 or 12 minutes. But it's the way you can move in and out from from our body to universe and go back in our body. The idea of how you can move inside the dimension of things. This is a very interesting film that I really tell you to have, if you have the chance to see it. And this is what we do exactly in our spaces, because we have to go from outside inside. And when I mentioned before the frame, this is what I mentioned. The frame is something that I can see from far, but I can enter to some. And how I do it with lenses, with mirror, with something that allow me to extrude the dimensions, I think is interesting. The other aspect, the third aspect, is movement. As I said, movement has a kind of a cinematographic sequences. Very. If you see a kaleidoscope inside, it's almost like a clip, like a movie, right? But just because you see things moving, just because you see people moving inside, would transform completely a dead space, almost like a space without any action, in an action space, even without having particular technology, something that allows you to transform, allows you to transform this in a sort of a cinematographic sequences. And I think is very intriguing, and also dragging people in a dimension of dynamic technologies. Also here you can see this is on the right side. You have one of the, I think, most interesting exhibitions designed in '64 by Vittorio Gregotti, and also there was Umberto Eco involved. There was many other interesting designers and architects, and also people, creative people involved. There was a huge kaleidoscope inside the Triennale di Milano that completely transformed the perception of the Triennale into a new, completely dynamic space with people walking and dancing on ceilings, on this inclined walls. I think was very interesting, and interesting to mention. And of course, the fourth part is light. We can transform the space into light. We can use the light and the colors with the mirror, as Castiglione did it for Gibigiana. We can use it inside. Inside, you can transform. You can have take advantage of this, the features that this material, this object, mirror has, to transform the space in colors, to transform the space of course, in light, just by adding to deal with this material, to deal with that. The fifth part, which I think is also very interesting, in the illusion. The mirror, you can transform. You can meet the place and transform this illusion in something different. This is very interesting. Vivian Mayer portrait, right? Of course. I have to tell you also that, 3-4 years ago, there was a very interesting exhibition at the Saatchi Gallery in London about selfie. Please go on internet, go on browse and try to find the images, because there was a very interesting exhibition starting from Las Meninas of Velázquez, this great masterpiece and painting. And there was an whole exhibition about innovation in selfie, not just obvious selfie. Very interesting from artists, new technologies, and so on. So the illusion is something that we have to present in our spaces, in our exhibition design, in our, I would say, environmental spaces. And we can use it without technology, just by having the capability of managing this material, where I practice a lot, and I try to develop that in the last very many years. Of course, illusion is like this. Michelangelo Pistoletto, he thinks and he says that anytime a piece of art is transformed by the audience, so people, they can move in and join the subject and transforming. This is a sort of dynamic piece of art, just by the usage of mirror to transform it, including people. The illusion of being there allow you to memorize also more, because we need to awake people, try to awaken them from being only visitors and transform them in actors. And I think this is very important. Illusion is also distortion. You can transform this. This is by Anish Kapoor. This is a great cloud gate in Chicago that interesting, but also very innovative in the way it surfaced. And I think also in the way that the fiction, this point of view will change. You can have lens. That's why you can transform this idea of mirror in something in a lens. It would transform you completely the perception of spaces. And those 5 points are something that you can manage one to each other, and you can transform the perception of your spaces in something really virtual by adding this characteristic. And I did it, and I show you some of the project. This is a wallpaper exhibition that we designed many years ago in Milano, and we had only object under the floor, and under the floor the object were presented just by using light under the floor with this kind of a inclined mirror that would interacted with people just by moving and activate. So there's sort of a illusion, reflection, and capability to drag the attention to this kind of, almost like your floor is with the light, your floor is with things, but things are floating and I would say flying in front of you by the usage of this kind of a system. And this was quite interesting. Actually, we did this project. There was another part with a projection of a city with almost like a building there. And this was myself and Achille Castiglioni. He came to visit there during the assembly, and I was also very proud of that. And mirror, as I said, can transform the space into endless space, but just by, especially if you have almost like a concentrated activation that we have. This is a B&B exhibition we did in Triennale di Milano, and we had 8 boxes, almost like cages with inside contents of B&B. Everything was dynamic, but the idea was to transform everything is a sort of a huge brain with connections. And the idea of the usage of the mirror was very important for us, because we wanted to connect, visual, digital, and technology by having 2 opposite mirror. This is a scale model. As I said, we also tried that in studio in our office very much. This is a still scale model working. We also in our office we have this characteristic to produce scale models with 2 things: people inside, of course, small people to understand the scale, and everything is with a light inside and with the usage of technology. We try to present mirrors and projection even in small scale. So this was the perception of the space, completely emphasized and completely open to another pathway for people to extend, not only visually, but also the digital part was double in the way that you had the perception to see a long mirror with a long projection on top of it. This was a very interesting technology. We use electroluminescent technology. This is the film. This actually is a painting that with a high frequency is transformed into light. And you have this. I have just here a video about that. Every surface was conceived almost like lens, big lens, with the capability of being transformed by from people to be near or to be far, and including the light within the content. So we have no other light system, but everything was lit by with this technology, and of course with this kind of a projection added to the mirror, in which you had like a completely different perception of the space. Of course, as you can see, when you project, when you have this interaction with digital and physical and digital, also with mirror, with this kind of reflection, it's interesting to transform also everything that is in writing, everything that is in, to try to put it in many different orientations. So people, they can maybe they activate a sort of a perception which they can not really perceive, which one is the correct way of reading, from one side from another. And also the idea of dynamic was included in this. This was also very interesting technology because we used this kind of a plastic stripe within this kind of a innovative painting that is called electroluminescent painting. And also this is an installation that we did in Paris. It was interesting because we wanted to include there was dynamic. There was an installation we did in front of to present for an installation for an open space for thoughts in this very old building, and we want to include people, the visitors, into the space just by adding this kind of a dynamic mirror. This is a dynamic mirror, was floating from one side to another, but the central mirror, this lens in the middle, wouldn't change because by rotating the image is the same. You can only move the image, but you not move the perception. And I think was very interesting the way people would activate the relationship between the background, what is behind them and what is in front of them. So this is, as I said, a possibility to use, if you manage those kind of techniques in the way, you can activate also a very much strong relationship between the outside, the background, as I say, what's surrounding and what you have inside. Another interesting thing that we did in Tokyo about with the usage of mirrors is this exhibition about Krizia in fashion brand in Tokyo, very big history about fashion. And it was complicated. It was about 1,000 square meters, more than 1,000 square meters, and we was curated by Gabriella Pescucci, that she won the Oscar for The Age of Innocence. This is great, very nice lady, and also with Mariuccia Vandelli, Krizia, that she was, the art director of the brand. And inside we have this almost like suspended architecture in the middle, within two big, we call specchio puma, like mirror, like almost like, I cannot say, like very light feather, like it's called feather mirror, like puma, and very, very light. And by having those two mirrors, the idea was to consider almost like a city, like urban redesign of a big long street and buildings facing people to meet this kind of and then this kind of a subject. The idea of people to enter, to be attracted by this, the idea of the space, included space, was done by the mirror, of course, and the idea of also by using lenses to transform this part that I will show you later in something that just by people to approach, they had the perception of object within, otherwise, but I have to explain you later. So this is the concept, as you can see, was a sort of a infinite space with those suspended 6 or 7 suspended boxes, of very big, almost like big rooms suspended, with a dynamic system of motion. We were activating and moving different scenarios, which was very interesting. And people were seated and moving, seated in front, just looking at every scenario, but then also they had the chance to move all around. It was a very much dynamic situation for people. And the usage of mirror was critical to establish this I would say really environmental design for that. And the second part was including some of the garments in this suspended glass sheets, slabs, very big slabs, on which we apply a very specific film, was called lumisti, a special kind of film in which if you are in front of it with an angle of 60 degrees, you can see what is inside. If you just move away, you see something foggy, something almost like floating in the fog. And you can see this is how it was if you were not in the straight with the angle, but if suddenly when you are straight to the angle, you can see inside. This is very clear. And this was the idea of lens, to attract people, to drag people in a sort of as I said, virtuality, which is not virtual because it's real, but adding technical, very interesting aspect of technical, which are not connected to technologies, to new technology, to digital. But this is something physical that people had the chance to meet, and only in that moment, in that very moment. You cannot project something like that by using a computer. And this was the very interesting aspect that we developed. That was many, many years ago, I think, but I'm always very proud to show this project, as you can see, and also the idea of dynamic things, of moving, also we had a part of projections, but we had also, as I said, the physical part of dynamic done by mirrors and by the usage of this kind of unique film. Also in permanent exhibitions, we had also in museums, we used mirrors and this kind of a system of lenses to establish relationships, to transform, to attract, but also to establish, I would say, a new way of storytelling, engaging, also personal, and also to use this kind of a physical virtuality that people engage in and be participant. This is in the Chopin Museum we did in Warsaw. It's a permanent museum, of course, and we won the competition in 2008 and was built in 2 years. And it's a big museum about the history of Frédéric Chopin with many. There's an old building transformed, old palace with transformed in a museum. It's a very beautiful place, and within many things. But this is the basement under the cellars were transformed partially. There were two parts, one is below and one is above. The part was transformed as a sort of a magic place in which people could meet the original object, like included in this, displayer here, in this, special, with a special kind of a glass, special kind of a light, because we're original pieces, original scores, original, pieces from Chopin. And then there was also like a big mirror of interaction. By approaching the mirror, by touching the mirror, the mirror would activate a completely new relationship between you, recognizing you, because you had a ticket with your profile, with yourself, with your language, and you can activate a relationship between them, almost like a magic mirror, right? Talking to you in a way. And also the way we designed the contents inside the mirror, interested because we didn't use like a square things, always like generating things from the middle, having like almost like object floating in this kind of a background. This is another example. The other one is only a mirror within content. This is a real room. There is another room between another magic mirror. Just by activating, the room would disappear and would appear completely with the dynamic motion of people playing in this room. This was the room of, we call the father room, where his father was teaching music, and he was very much when he was a child. And in this room included the piano of his father and also the activity. But this activity of meeting this, I would say this, because it was a case, right, a showcase in this with a glass protecting the contents. But this glass activates a possible relationship between what you have in the score there and what you meet after within the contents, and many other situations transform in that. As you can see, we had also digital part included, including people, including objects and storytelling with this kind of a personal individual relationship. Another project, quite small, this project in Triennale di Milano, I think it's interesting because it includes many things that I showed you in up to now. Is a brand, is about small 180 square meters in Milano for the brand Moreschi, and we have this kind of a magic cube, only one cube inside this room. We wanted to present the history of this brand. This brand is producing shoes from Vigevano. It's a very important brand, very with a high quality of materials, leathers and rubber, specific kind of, especially kind of details. The way they assemble things are very interesting. The way they do things with the hands, even though it's a company, it's a big company, and also we wanted to present, like, bring people in a dimension of walking with the quality. So that's why we have this kind of a cube of experience that we call in the middle of this exhibition. And you can see we have this cube in the middle, but we have the big space for this, also for meeting people and for having other kind of a projection. Those projections were conceived with two mirror walls facing each other, and so this projection became very like endless projection. And then also this cube became a multiplicity of cubes because of the mirror. And underneath in this cube we had like we decided also we took almost like a movie about that, like a clip about, you know, almost in 2 minutes we summarized with, of course, in the studio, almost like in one day under the surface of the ground, or a little just under the surface of the ground surface, under the surface. And you can, and we activate that inside the cube. This is the projection with the long projection with the two mirrors, and then this is the cube on the right side. But just by entering to the cube, you have this. You have the chance to perceive a sort of an endless ceiling, but not a ceiling, because it almost should be the earth under the surface of our ground. And then we had, you know, activated that with projection from above, and at the same time we had physical possibility to touch leather. We can smell the leather. So, but everything was physical and virtual in the you know, representation of the mirror. Two parts were mirrors like this, as you can see here, and inside those mirrors we had a clip about the assembly, the process of assembling these shoes from the leather, from cutting the leather up to that in a very dynamic way. And I show you this because I think it's quite interesting to be understood. And it was quite complicated, but it worked very well. People were entering in this, you know, I would say magic cube, experiencing this kind of because of the usage of the mirror, because of the usage of this kind of a magic mirror on the way, and also of the adding technology to this kind of a, you know, environmental, as you can see, not only cube but many because of this. And this was inside. It was quite interesting because we had like the wind, we have the rain, we had also the soundscape inside was interesting because we had inside, you know, leaves, you know, flying because of the wind. We had, you know, people walking, running. We had a dog running above you. And then in the mirror, as you can see, we had the completely extension, almost like completely changed the perception of the square. It became a flat surface, huge flat surface on top of you without seeing yourself, because we have those kind of a pipes, cube. And then in the mirror, behind the mirror, we have this kind of a magic assembly of the contents, producing a shoe, producing that. I think it's very interesting because everything was connected. The idea of new storytelling connected to virtual and real at the same time. The last project to end my presentation, so this was the last, is, as I said, the mirror can become a sort of a light, and of course to produce light and colors. And we did it here. We were called 3 years ago by Intesa San Paolo to design this installation on top of the skyscraper by Renzo Piano, and this is a very interesting place. It's a bioclimatic greenhouse at the 37th floor, and then is an open place with sort of a garden in which we conceived this program is called Luci d'Artista, Light of Artists. We wanted to design something that is a light, but was also something connecting the natural light with the artificial light and mirroring everything, people in motion, moving, and colors at the same time, because this is a garden. We wanted to almost like floating, almost like a vortex of floating leaves starting from in this. It was quite complicated to design, but it was interesting because we had a big installation. Yeah, it's like this between the 35 and 37th floor, and it was about 78 slabs, assembled in this way, almost like a dynamic motion, all suspended with, and connected with a computer, with a system of LED system of lighting that can adjust their light according to the external light, and also they can transform the light into a special kind of effect, because we add to this, we treat these materials with the metacrite sheets with the silkscreen printing technology that will allow you to transform this from transparent to opaque, and also adding this dichroic film that is a dichroic film that just transformed that into a mirror, into a light mirror. So this idea was like this. Sometimes was a present, sometimes was completely visible, and by the reflections of this kind of a very colored mirror, but also appearing and disappearing mirror because of technology, because also adding to this mirror the light, the LED technology. This was suspended. And I think it's quite interesting because you can see, anytime you can go there, you have a different perception, because by yourself moving, you can perceive different the space, and by also according to what is going to happen outside. Maybe it's a foggy day, maybe it's a rainy day, maybe it's a very with a very big sun shining day. So this is the final effect, and this is something that we wanted to. As you can see, from sunrise to sunset to midday to evening, the perception would change completely, thanks to the idea of adding this mirror, this kind of a dichroic film to the slabs, and also to the activation of this becoming transparent or translucent or opaque just by adding the light, which are all very stripe of LED stripes, and you can see here sometimes this disappears because you don't even see it, and I think I finished off with this video clip. We can show you how it is, and it the beginning should have been temporary, but then became permanent. This installation now is still permanent in the skyscraper of Renzo Piano in Torino, and is included matches the background very much. We were very much connected. We want much to connect the background, the contents, of course, this kind of a garden. This is a greenhouse to this light, and to the outdoor, to the outside, almost like a new nature within the nature. So to end, I just want to finish with this. I try to, as I give you a sort of a glance in this interesting world of reflections, and also virtual and real at the same time. But also just suggesting you to investigate materials. Not the technology, digital is very interesting to be used, but also to be added to specific kind of materials. And I think when we can manage the idea of transparency or reflections and activation of new background for people to be involved, transform people to be from contemplation to participation, involve them in this specific theory that I call mirroring effect. That is not only having the mirror, but dragging people in measuring themselves inside, try to be activated as real actors, not in a play in which they can play and understand what the contents are, and also to negotiate with the surroundings. So I think this is very important. So this is over, Marco. I think it's I try to summarize in almost an hour, and just to be very much linked to this idea of virtuality and reality.